Let's talk about that, because it wasn't just the books that you had available for sale, but you had additional book adjacent materials. Was that part of the success? Like, had it just been books, do you think it would have been a successful event?
Absolutely not. No way. It was almost $700 to the table. So you can do the math as an author, how many books you would have to sell. There's no way. I determined early on that just selling books for me was, because I only have like a couple, was maybe making the table, maybe not, because you're at a craft fair. So I'm pretty crafty. So I started doing, I changed it from Jody Swannell to Swannell Bookery, and I do everything bookish. So I'm keeping it about books. So I do book sleeves, pencil cases, pens, book bags, book pins, I have notebooks, all this stuff. So then I have the craft bug, right? And I have sewing machines. So I'm able to make all these things and put it together. So maybe you don't read my genre. Maybe you don't read, but maybe you probably know somebody who does, right? So maybe a book sleeve or a nice bookmark will work for you. So it's good for gifts.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectors, and welcome to episode 393 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Jody Swannell, an author who writes in the genres of thriller, mystery, occult, and science fiction. We talk about her writing, her experience hosting a local radio program, and an interesting pivot she made in-person selling at local fairs. And what I love is the way that Jody has been able to connect her books and her writing with other adjacent products and activities. And I think that is a fantastic strategy. So we talk about all of that and so much more, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Superstars Writing Seminars. In 2009, best-selling authors Kevin J. Anderson, Brandon Sanderson, Dave Wolverton, Eric Flint, and Rebecca Mesta got together to share how they handled various aspects of their writing businesses. Considering themselves fortunate to have friends from whom they could learn, these authors observed that because writing is an often solitary art form, most authors probably don't have access to professionals in their field to help them on their journey. As a result, they founded Superstars Writing Seminars. The first official one was held in 2010. The mission statement for Superstars Writing Seminars is to educate and assist writers and other related professions on the business and processes of writing, editing, publicizing, and publishing in traditional and independent environments, and to provide context and resources in multiple disciplines related to publishing. Now, I've been speaking at Superstars Writing Seminars since 2012, and in recent years have taken on the role of the conference's main MC. It's the most valuable conference I attend every year, not just for the learning that happens, but for the incredibly powerful networking and numerous connections I've made there over the years. Now, you can get $100 off your registration for the February 2025 conference, which is being held February 6th through 9th, 2025, using coupon code MARK1592. That's MARK1592. That's all uppercase, at least for the letters, not uppercase numbers. The numbers are already both cases, aren't they? In any case, MARK1592 will get you that. There will be a link to that over at the show notes over at starkreflections.ca. But if you want to check this out, and you've heard me talk about Superstars Writing Seminars numerous times over the years in this podcast, and you're curious to check it out, this coupon code for $100 off, which is Mark1592, can save you $100 off for first-time attendees. And I hope maybe I'll see you there in February. Okay, I'm going to skip comments for this episode again. So much on the plate as the year is wrapping up. I realize there's only 2 more podcast episodes for this year. This one and next week's episode. But I did want to say thank you to those who do send comments directly to me or leave comments over at starkreflections.ca on YouTube, on the socials. I do appreciate your comments. You sharing your own reflections of what you're thinking about when you're listening to the episode really motivates me, because it reminds me that I'm learning while I do this, but so are you. I'm reflecting, but so are you. Let's reflect together. I am planning, hopefully I'm going to try for episode 400 to have a all reflections episode with myself, as well as a bunch of voices from my listeners. And over the next few weeks, I'll be setting up ways that you can send your reflections into me, either text or in some sort of auditory format, so we can hear your awesome voices as well, if you're interested in sharing, of course. But over to personal update. It has been just an absolutely busy time, as it often is. I haven't been doing as much traveling, although as this episode's going live, I will be heading to Sudbury, Ontario, to be doing an event on Saturday, December 21st, with the Northern Lights Festival Boreal and Sudbury Indie Cinema. There's a fundraiser movie showing of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation to raise money for this fantastic festival that's been taking place in Sudbury every summer since 1972. It's a celebration of music, arts, and culture. They're doing a fundraiser with the movie showing. Refreshments that are sold there will also raise money, and 40% of my book sales, the 40% of the proceeds of the sales from my book, Merry Christmas, Shitter Was Full, are going to go to support Northern Lights Festival Boreal at that special event on the 21st. But I've been doing a lot of events with this book, and I have to mention, because I think it was last Thursday, so I would have already had the episode recorded by the time I sent this out, but I did an event at the Apollo Theatre in Kitchener, Ontario, and it was absolutely amazing. I sold about 70 books, and there were only about 100 people who came to the showing. Now, the theater sits about 310, but there were only about 100 people who came, but I still sold 70 books, and I sold them in the lobby in front of the theater just as people were coming in. Most of those sales took place within about a half hour. The theater also gave me an opportunity that there's a microphone. Before the film started, I had about 10 minutes where I just talked to them, and I shared some fun trivia and shared some Easter eggs, things you should look for when you're watching the movie. Have a look for this, because this is a reference to, the script or the short story that John Hughes wrote, or this is a reference to this other thing here. And so I thought that was a lot of fun. I had a really good time. The folks at the theater who manage and work the theater were amazing. But so too were the people who came. It was just so much fun. And it was a reminder to me as a writer that, okay, I have 3 different movie trivia books. There's a lot of independently owned repertoire theater houses that play, classics, like repeated classics like Christmas Vacation, like Die Hard, like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles over the years. And so what I'm probably going to try to do, my learnings from this was, oh my God, I made as much money in half an hour as I sometimes do when I'm there for an entire day, an 8-hour day for a table that I've paid for. And it was just amazing, because Liz turns to me and says, wow, this is way better than those really long day events, because it's very concentrated and it's target audience. Like, not everyone's a reader, but the reason I sold so many books with only 100 people there is I think maybe only 30 people maybe came and bought, 25, 30 transactions potentially, but people would come in and say, "Oh, I'll take 2 copies of the book. I'll take 4 copies of the book." Now, I had my Merry Christmas Shitter Was Full book there, but I also had the Canadian Mounted about planes, trains, and automobiles, and I also had my Yippee-Ki-Yay MF, the Die Hard trivia book, and I had a special. So if you bought 3 books, you can get, they're $15 each Canadian, or you can get all 3 for $35, so you would save $10. So people were, buying one of each, or buying like one of each of the books and getting them signed for different people. Great stocking stuffers for different folks. Other people were taking advantage of, wanting to buy numerous copies. So again, you could buy any combination of 3 books would get you that special deal. And it was absolutely amazing. So I'm thinking next year, planning probably early in the year, mid-year, reaching out to a whole bunch of different theaters within driving distance and saying, okay, when are you planning on playing these movies? Here's what I'd like to do. Whether I pay for a table up front or I give a proceed of the book sales to the house, to the theater, whatever. I'm flexible. And what I'm doing, for example, is they can sell the book themselves. They can sell it through their register, or I sell them. And then what I just do is, which I'm doing with Festival Borealis, at the end of the event, I'll take cash and I'll take my Square Reader, and then I'll just do a transfer, an e-transfer or whoever it is, to the venue as well. So I just think, wow, that was a really... I stepped in something good, as Balky Bartokomous used to say to his cousin Larry on the TV show Perfect Strangers. Cousin, you stepped in something good this time. So I did step in something good with this. So I'm going to look at trying to leverage that in more ways. I will, of course, be including that as one of the case studies in the ever-growing A Book in Hand, which will be coming out in early 2025. I just keep adding stuff to it because there's so many different examples. There's examples, of course, from what Jody talks about in this episode, but also this other, personal example as well. And I love having examples from so many different authors doing so many different cool things. But speaking of cool things, Jody's doing some cool things, has done some cool things, and continues to do some cool things. She is a member of a couple local writers groups that I'm a member of, and I'm so glad I got a chance to connect with her, and I'm even more happy that I got a chance to bring her onto the podcast so you could benefit from listening to our conversation. And that conversation is coming up right after this bumper. Hey, Jody, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I was glad I got a chance to chat with you with the benefit of my listeners listening in on the conversation. So just to get started, where did you get started as a writer?
Oh, well, I'm sure many people think about it this way. You start, you stop. So I started writing, just, journaling and things like that. Maybe 20, 30 years ago. I'm aging myself here, but yeah, I've always enjoyed the process. I'm a huge reader. So
Right.
I used to, spend at least, an hour a week at Chapters. It used to be Chapters Indigo. I loved going there, shopping, sitting there. They let you read the books without buying. So flipping through, get a Starbucks. So I just was a voracious reader. And, when you read, you're always thinking of how you're guessing ahead. Oh, how would this story go and whatnot? So you start writing it in your mind. And yeah, I guess I was thinking for a long time, I'd love to write a book, but I had no idea how. And I think, COVID, everything being online really gave us, like some of us, the opportunity to do a lot of research and say, oh, there's a thing where you can publish it yourself. I don't even have to go through all of the hassle of, getting an agent and stuff. So I had decided right away that I was just going to self-publish. I was going to do the book that I wanted to do, which was like a sci-fi, my first one, Dark Reaction. And, it kind of spiraled from there. So
So
I'm
does that mean that the actual serious writing, where you actually sat down and started to go for it, really didn't happen until the pandemic? So like 4 years ago?
no less, a little
Oh,
bit
wow.
after. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I started writing it, I think 2021. Mhm.
Okay. Oh, wow. And how many books have you released since then?
So I Wrath of a Sister is a short story. It's a prequel to Oracle Hunter, which is a novel.
Ah, okay.
Dark Reaction is a novel, and
Right.
I also have a novella called Magic Passage. So,
Okay.
so I have
Okay.
two books, one novella. I've published a few, like a tarot guide, for beginners and stuff like
Okay.
that. But yeah,
Oh.
I sort of dove right in.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, the whole world opened up and you took advantage and you said, okay, let's do this.
yeah, yeah. And one thing leads to another, which leads to another, and I just like to ride the waves.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that you were inspired by that. When you were so you write in the speculative realms. Was that did you read in those realms as well, or were you reading in other areas as well?
Yes. I think the first books that I started reading were like back in the 90s. I read Stephen King and Diana Gabaldon.
Okay.
So Stephen King has like a kind of a supernatural, and I'm really influenced by movies and TV shows. So, big
Yeah.
Star Wars, Star Trek, yeah, X-Files, all that kind of stuff. I'm a geek, right? So
Yeah.
Marvel, anything. I love, contemporary. I write contemporary fiction with like a supernatural element to it.
Okay. Alrighty. So the latest that's the Oracle Hunter. Is that the latest project?
Yes.
Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
So it's about a serial killer that's hunting fortune tellers in Toronto.
Okay. So, all right. So this ties into your tarot reading and your understanding of that world because you said you have a guide as well for people, right?
Yes. Which I published after Oracle Hunter because I did so much research that I thought,
Oh, so this was something you researched. This wasn't something you were already doing.
right.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. Let's talk a little bit about the research involved then. So you had the serial killer, the fortune teller. So you actually all of that was research. It wasn't a world you were already familiar with.
Yeah, I'm as familiar as most people are.
Right.
I've had a set of tarot cards. I've played around with them, but I don't really know a lot. I don't
Right.
practice witchcraft or anything funky like that. But I appreciate anything spiritual, like native background, religion. I love it all. I just love stories, right? So, I found it fascinating, and I thought I could integrate it into the markets because there was a I was doing Harry Potter book sleeves, and there was a lot of attention for stuff like that. So I
Right.
thought maybe I'll, do the guide up because other people have kind of an interest, and there isn't a lot of accessible beginners.
Right. Yeah.
So if you want to do it yourself, like where do you find? It's just the internet. So I thought,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna
Huh.
I'm gonna prepare that, and then I sell them at the markets.
Oh, that is cool. So, selling at the markets, is that a common experience for you? Is that something that works in terms of getting out there and getting the book into new readers' hands?
Yes. So, as I'm not sure how it works for you because I see you do a lot of marketing, but you probably know that, writing the book, publishing the book seems like the hard part until you get that all done and then you try to market the book.
Yes.
That to me, that was the most challenging thing, especially
Yeah.
if you're self-published and even traditional publishing, doesn't necessarily go anywhere. You have to do it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I was at a market just before it was before Dark Reaction was finished, and I was at the Christmas market, and I saw Richard Stevens. I saw him with all his dragon books,
Yeah.
and I thought, oh, there's an author here. I wonder how that works. He's selling his books, right? So that was the first time I had seen anything like that, and I signed up for the next year's market before I even had my book published because I thought, how am I going to do this? Because I'm not dumping money into Amazon ads or any of these things. Because
Yeah.
I read a lot ahead, and I read about how ineffective and how much people experience failure and talk to people before I even started that. So it just seemed like I didn't have big expectations. I just thought, I'm going to write a book for me. And then my friends and family liked it, and then I go to markets and other people liked it. So it just kind of kept going.
Oh, that is cool. That is really cool. And speaking of Richard, now you just retired from a position via a local radio station here in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and I think Richard has taken over
That's
as
right.
as host.
That's a
but
pretty
prior
small
to,
world.
but you had recently retired from that, and you were a natural. You were a really good interviewer. I was lucky enough to be on the show, and it was just
Yeah.
a wonderful experience. And sitting in the hot seat there as running the whole thing, I thought you were a natural at it. But and then you had retired. So let's first talk about the decision on how this opportunity came up and how and why you reached out for the ring, and the evolution of that whole experience.
Okay. So the truth is, when it came up, I thought it would be a good way to help promote my stuff.
Yeah,
Right. So I thought, and because joining the KW Writers Alliance and going to some of these book fairs, we're all in the same boat here. Everybody is struggling to, put their books in people's hands and find a way to help just get out there and
right,
get an opportunity to meet with people or tell their story or promote their books. And I thought, so I could help people do that. And if there was nobody or somebody canceled, I thought I'll just read mine. But I had
right.
no intentions of doing that, unless somebody didn't show up. But initially, I thought it would be a good way to learn more about the writing process. I always asked the authors questions because I know what I got from the internet, but I learned so much from talking to people, and I just thought it would be fun.
Cool. And I guess it was fun. It was fun to listen to, but it was more than just okay, you show up once a week and for an hour you're in a studio. I guess you learned that there was a lot more behind the scenes, right?
That's right. So you have to know how to work the equipment in the studio. So you have to be a programmer and you have to get a membership with the radio station. So there's fees involved. Now, the KW Writers Alliance covered that, but in case anybody was ever interested in it, because you
Yeah.
can start your own show, you can go there and approach them and have your own show.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, most of the shows are music. Ours was called like a spoken word.
yeah,
So that was what the category it was under. But as programming, there's also software that I had to learn. There's Libra time, and then you had to use the radio station's website. That way, if people weren't listening to our show live, like you can go on, I could have went on there and just interviewed you, and then there it's gone,
yeah,
right? I had to take and grab that file, learn how to upload it and create a post on their website. They don't do that for you. You have to learn, you have to go through the process, and then you have to do it each time, and it's a big
right,
file. And for a while I was trying to do video files, and of course Facebook and Instagram have banned all radio stations, and the CKMS 107, yeah, they're considered news, so we
right.
couldn't share it on Facebook or Instagram or anything. So that was another wall. The KW Writers Alliance dealt with the scheduling, but everything else I made up.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
you know,
But
so
then
I
you,
was writing and doing research on authors, because if you come on the show, some people would tell me, you know, about themselves, and other times I just had a name. So I had nothing to introduce them.
oh,
So
really? You had nothing.
I
You
had
just had a name.
nothing.
Oh, wow. So, wow.
So I would just go and I'd Google the person and screenshot their book and try and do some posts to help promote them, because that was the point, right?
Yeah,
And
wow.
it was a lot more work than I thought, because I didn't know I was the one who was going to be doing that. But if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it,
Yeah,
right?
right.
My name's on there. I want it to look like this.
Of
So
course. Yeah.
I went and did all this work, but it was so much because I work full time. I write, I do a lot of crafting. That's my sewing room and everything. And I go to the markets and try to promote my stuff. So I have a dog, a cat, and a son with a girlfriend. I've got lots of stuff, right? I
Yeah.
don't have time to be, you know, doing all this stuff too. And my husband's like, "You're stressed all the time." I've got a lot of energy, but I'm like, I'm turning 50 in a week. And I just couldn't keep up with everything. It was just stressing me out. So we decided, okay, what's got to go, and this was the lowest on my
Yeah.
priority list.
Well, I
I
guess
did
from
enjoy
that,
it.
sorry?
I did enjoy it. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want it to sound terrible, but it was just too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. And I guess based on that experience of sometimes you would just get an author's name and have nothing else to go on. So suddenly you're hitting the ground running. So I want to turn this around for listeners who who want to be guests on radio shows or podcasts or whatever and say, I mean, well, what are some of the things that make it easier for the host to actually do a compelling interview segment?
Yeah, some of the things, like for sure, you like the way you have it set up is great. The author bio, if you want to have a picture, send that. What book, picture of
Yeah.
the book, whatever you need. It's very helpful. I did have a chance to meet with people before they came on the show so I could get the pronunciation of their name because some names are a little bit harder and you don't want it to you don't want to say, hey, this is so and so, and they're like, actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Showing up on time is nice.
Yeah. And that was
Yeah.
and that was was it live? Was it
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a live show, so it was at the same time. So that also meant you had to be there every single day or every single
Yeah.
weekday that was being recorded, which could I mean, that must have posed challenges. I was just away for 7 days at a conference, so how could I have possibly hosted a show like that, right?
Well, that's it too, right? So when I wanted to, that's why this had to go, because so if I missed out on a lot of the markets because every 4 weeks I was doing Reader's Delight
Yeah,
and couldn't do it. So I mean, I'm committed to that, and I was
yeah,
committed to that.
yeah,
But in the end, I just was happy that Richard had volunteered to take over. I was going to do it till January, but I was able to join a couple of other markets on top of that, just so that I could get out there and promote, because it was good to host and promote the people and everything, but like it was hard. Like, and you go down there and you've got to set up the studio. Sometimes the equipment there was not functioning, and then I
yeah,
had to make sure I have 3 people. Initially, they wanted me to have 4 authors on, and I said I can't do it. I have to talk to each one. I have to tell them how the equipment works. I have to make sure that the volume's good on their mics. I have 1 hour,
yeah,
right? I have 1 hour and I have to switch them in and out. So I've got to work the equipment, put the commercials on. And it was just like, it was a lot. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. But you've decided to retire from that, and that's basically because that gets you both your life back and your writing life back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
has it been? Has it been? It's been a couple months since.
Yeah. It hasn't been too long. So I think my last show was with you in September.
Oh, was that the last show? Okay. All right. So yeah,
Richard
it's
was
been a
there with-
month and
Yeah.
a bit. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think I think there's only one show that I've missed right now. I
Right.
think the second one, he might have done the second one. I don't know. I'm not sure. The one after mine, I think nobody showed up. So he was on there with Vanessa, and then they just did some chatting, which is another risk that you would have as people don't show, right? I didn't
Yeah.
have that. That didn't happen. But you got to prepare for that. That's another thing. What
Yeah.
do
If
you
someone doesn't show up,
yeah.
what do you do? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You got to have a contingency plan. I had my book with me half the
Yeah.
time just in case. And I had one where the lady didn't show. So I had 2 guests, and it was perfectly fine because then I get to chat a little bit. Like you and I
Yeah.
can chat for half an hour, no problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess having someone there to talk with and have that banter, that back and forth banter with another writer probably makes it a bit easier than just trying to fill the space on your own.
Yes, yes. And the guests were fabulous. I mean, everybody I had on it was pretty cool. There was different
Yeah.
genres, different backgrounds. I learned so much. The writing was brilliant, and I love listening to the authors read their own work. So
Yeah.
I had an excellent experience, and I met some great folks, you
Hmm.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. It is always good to get
I've
well,
no
yeah, as well. You get to meet a lot of different people from the local writing community as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah,
Exactly, because when I published Dark Reaction, I didn't know one writer.
right. Oh,
Nah,
wow.
I didn't know anybody. I just went out there and I just did it.
Yeah, and then think about like the few dozen writers that you got to know just from the show alone.
Yeah, exactly. And the KW Writers Alliance as well. Meeting
Yeah,
other authors, and they help each other, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know what to do." And I'm like, I was able to help them. But I didn't have that support because I didn't know about it. So
Yeah.
even on the radio station, I made it a point at the end. I don't know if you noticed or how many shows you listen to. I would always say upcoming events, and then there's this going on, so that anybody listening, because a lot of other authors would listen, would know these are your resources or these are where you can find them, right? So that was
Yeah.
also an important part for me on the show.
Yeah, well, that is a very important part because yeah, you're listening to it now because you're interested as a reader. What are the other things you can do in the KW area that may be of interest to you too? Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Exactly, for other writers too.
So, have you been bitten by any sort of bug? Are you now tempted to do something else, or are you just happy to have that time back?
Crochet. I taught myself to crochet.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so crochet is one of the things.
It's hockey season. My husband's a Leaf fan, so now I can sit there and
Yeah, fair
yeah.
enough. Fair enough. Does that give you more time for your own writing now?
It does. I've kind of taken a hiatus because after I wanted to get the Oracle Hunter out for DreadCon,
Right.
basically. So
Okay.
I had Wrath of a Sister, which was it was
Yep.
an introduction to the protagonist, and the Oracle Hunter was something that I pushed myself, and I had a deadline, and I pushed myself to meet it, and then it's just kind of like, all right, so now I want to work on a sequel to Magic Passage. So I've got it outlined, but right now I'm not writing. I just have the outline, the skeleton. It's a novella, so it'll be quicker. So I won't
Right.
have it out for Christmas, but I'm hoping in the new year to get that out.
Now, is there some other sort of deadline, like you had DreadCon for the Oracle Hunter? Is there any sort of deadline sometime early in the new year that, like some show you're going to be doing that you need to have it for?
Magic Passage. Oh yeah. So the next one will be, I think, Magic Revenants. I think is what I've come down to as a title. No, I thought maybe I would do it for this Christmas, and there's just no way it's not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Just after Oracle Hunter, and I went to Frightmare in the Falls, which was a 3-day event,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so that was a big success because that was the good genre. I only have 4 books left from that. I'd have to order more before I can even sell them.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So Frightmare in the Falls was a success then.
I did well. I liked it. The thing is like if you don't live near the area, they had a 3-day event, so then you have to get a hotel and whatnot.
Yeah.
So and then that's where you're like,
Did you drive back and forth or did you get a hotel?
We stayed in a hotel. My husband went to the winery on the Saturday and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff at Niagara on the Lake. So next year, I think they're going to do 2 days instead. I
Yeah.
think if it was 2 days and you got a hotel in one day, it would even pay for the hotel. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was expensive, but yeah, like I would say it was a success. I had spent a lot of time preparing for that.
Yeah. Good
So
stuff.
I had lots of scary stuff. I do book sleeves too, and I had like Freddy Krueger, sweater material and
Yeah. Yeah.
Scream, and it was fun. I like horror movies.
Well, let's talk about that because it wasn't just the books that you had available for sale, which were obviously suitable for Frightmare in the Falls, but you had additional non-book but book adjacent materials.
Right.
Was that part of the success? Like, had it just been
Yes.
books, do you think it would have been a successful event?
Absolutely not. No way. It was almost $700 for the table. So
Right,
you can do the math as an author, how many books you would have to sell. There's no way.
right,
I determined early on that just selling books for me was because I only have like a couple was maybe making the table, maybe not,
right,
because you're at a craft fair. So I'm pretty crafty. So I started doing I changed it from Jody Swannell to Swannell Bookery, and I do everything bookish. So I'm keeping it about books. So I do book sleeves, pencil cases, pens, book bags, book pins, I have notebooks, all this stuff. So then I have the craft bug, right? And I have sewing machines. So I'm able to make all these things and put it together. So maybe you don't read my genre. Maybe you don't read, but you probably know somebody who does,
right.
right? So maybe a book sleeve or a nice bookmark will work for you. So it's good for gifts. I also do acrylic ring readers. So that's my number one thing. I sell these ring readers, and like they go on your thumb and hold your pages open. I don't know if you've ever seen them. I make
No,
them out of
no.
acrylic. Yeah, and I use the resin and I put flowers or charms or little bats in them, and people just love them.
So
They're
they're
like,
called acrylic ring readers.
Yeah.
Okay.
They go on your thumb and they hold your pages open.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So instead of like struggling, little things like that. So anything
Wow.
bookish, I try to have on my table. So I have my books as well. But like I said, horror, thriller genre isn't for everybody. I think the number one popular is young girls and they love romance. They're
Right.
like,
Right.
spicy. I'm like, nah, it's violent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here I've got some flower bookmarks. Do you like those?
Yeah.
So that keeps me going because marketing is hard, but if you're making a little bit of money and sell a couple books, I'm happy. I'm
Yeah.
happy. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting point that you would not have made the table back had it just been a bunch of books that you had there. But it was the book adjacent stuff that I guess I mean the margin for one, the margin on books is minimal.
Right.
And then even I guess if you're crocheting,
Mhm.
that's time well spent while your husband's watching the hockey game. You can sit there and just and crank out a bunch of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take some time. Like I just learning to do that now. And I have like the sewing and stuff. But to do something in front of the TV, you can't get the sewing machine out, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can't do this one. That's a little bit too loud.
Yeah, exactly. But so yeah, I've got buttons, pins, you name it. If I can connect it to reading or books, then I put it out there on the table. So
Yeah,
it's
nice.
fun. I have a lot of fun. I meet a lot of nice people.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I mean, it's also discussion points too,
Hmm.
because not everyone's a reader and they may not want to even ask about the books or talk about the books, but they
Right.
may want to find out, well, what's this little thumb thing that you got there?
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
awesome. Cool. So what's next for Jody?
Um, well, it's holiday season, so not too much. I've got this, like, there's a market coming up in Barrie,
Yeah,
another book fair. I'm going to that one, another Christmas one, another one in Ancaster. I think I have four more.
coming up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I'm trying to stay away from it for January and February so I can get back into writing.
Yeah.
So I've got all this stuff going on. I've got the material, I've got some supplies, so I'm ready for these Christmas markets because Christmas is a good time for salespeople want to buy unique stuff, right? Unique
Yeah.
gifts for the family members because everything's so easy to find now. And handmade is kind of popular, even though the market's saturated. So
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
awesome. Awesome. So, where can my listeners find out more about you, your writing, maybe the crafts, all the things that you're up to?
Well, I am on Facebook and Instagram, so it's under Swannell Bookery, so you can find me there. I do have, I guess it's not Twitter anymore; it's X. I have that, but I don't really deal with it very much. I don't really find it very successful for books and things like that. Seems to be more of a politics. But yeah, all my books are on Amazon. I think Dark Reactions in the local Indigo. I think it was in Waterloo, Kitchener, and Cambridge. Last time I checked, they were on the shelves. Just Dark Reaction. It takes a process when you self-publish to get it on the shelves into these bookstores. So I
Right.
went
Right.
through that with that book because that's my baby. The sci-fi is the one that
Of course.
my first one. But yeah, everything's on Amazon. You just Google me and you're going to get a whole bunch of nonsense.
Awesome. Well, Jody, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Okay, so just a few things to reflect on from the conversation with Jody. The first come in sort of batches of two, and I did mention this before the interview, but it was Jody's motivation for hosting a local community radio program as an out-of-the-box way of both learning more about writing, connecting with other writers, and also getting the word out about her own books. It was sort of a multi-tiered approach. Not only did she get to interact with and learn about so many different other writers in the community, but it was also a way to, to just be part of the community, as well as obviously a way of people very subtly allowing people to know about her as an author, her author brand, as well as books. And that's a really important thing because it kind of also in many ways established her as an important contact for other people who wanted to know. And that's a great place to be. So the other thing, of course, is, and it's related to this because Jody's looking at what she has in terms of her writing and her books, and she's looking at adjacent activities. So one of them is local radio program, and I'm going to get back to the radio program in just a second. But the other one was what we talked about towards the very end of the interview, which is the additional creation of book adjacent products, and how she pivoted from Jody Swannell Books to Swannell Bookery, which I think is an absolute genius move. Now, I've done Frightmare in the Falls. Yeah, it's close to $700 for the table, and then because it's far away, hotel room and meals and stuff like that. So the expenditures, I remember being there that one weekend. I have a lot of books available, but at the end of the process, at the end of the weekend, after all of I made good money, but after all my expenses were done, the cost of the table, the cost of the hotel, the cost of gas, the cost of eating, I think I only ended up making $100 or $200 at the end of all that. And I remember Liz saying, wow, that was a lot of work. You were there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you made $200. And I was like, yeah, good point. Very good point. First, I wasn't in the red. I actually made some money off of it. And the other thing was that in-person event was marketing in and of itself. I connected with so many people purchased my books who never would have heard of me, and other people who did know me. Some people showed up with copies of my books just so they could get them signed. So it was an experience I was giving. And again, I look at it as a marketing expenditure as well. So yeah, I only walked away a couple of $100 cash positive from that experience, but I did get other benefits out of that. But the reality is, it's hard to make money on books. And, Jody had said only had a couple books available, so would have had sold a lot of those books in order to turn a profit. So getting these, and I've seen some of the products that she's created. They're really cool because, again, you don't have to be a book person, or you're like, oh, I'm going to buy this book cover thingy, this package, I'm going to buy this related item. It's a lot easier to sell those, and typically a lot of those items are a smaller expenditure, right? So it's like, oh, it's just a few dollars. And I know with my own table, bringing in things like buttons, at Comic-Cons and stuff with cartoon characters and various elements on those buttons can really help, because it's like $1 or $2 or whatever. So having those related products can really draw other people into your table. I did see at a Kitchener Waterloo event, my neighboring table at an event I was at this summer, they had purchased a 3D printer, and they had some really cool, like, fidgety things that they were giving away for free at their table. And what I loved about it is there was always a group of people looking in their little bin to take things for free. And I think that's so cool. Another local author, and I'm drawing a name on her, I'm drawing a blank on her name, See Something, and I think her last name's King, and she has a book with, it's a humorous urban fantasy that features a duck shifter. And so she has these little really cute ducks, a big bin of ducks that she sells, but they're all these cute little ducks in different poses. Like one of them's, maybe reading a book, and the other one looks like a vampire, and the other one's whatever. So like all dressed up in different, but little rubber duckies. And again, that is adjacent, very connected to her book. So thinking about being inspired by Jody and other authors and the way they can have these book adjacent things, I just think it's just so brilliant. And I'm going to go back to I know this is a longer reflection, but hey, I think it may be worthwhile. Jody talked about her motivation for doing the radio program, but then the stress of doing too much, because she had to do all this groundwork, especially when there were authors who didn't, provide anything like any background. They just kind of showed up and said, yeah, I'll be at the show. So she has to go and do all this digging about them first, just so she can be a great host. She's an amazing host. I had the privilege of being interviewed by her, and she's really prepared, really amazing. But it was too much. It was it took away from what was important to her, which was the writing and the books and stuff like that. So she had to come to the decision to remove that and stop doing that. And I was just in earlier this week in a Wide for the Win wide stream, and I was talking with Susie O'Connell, who was also co-hosting that episode with me. And we were talking about planning for the new year, like writer planning. We're talking about different strategies and plans, thinking of plans like outlines for a book, because they can change once you get there, so they don't have to be set in stone. Don't beat yourself up trying to do it. And one of the things I raised was, okay, when you're planning, you may want to specifically plan things not to do, things that get in the way of what's important to you. And so deciding to remove something from your schedule, from your area of commitments, I think is just as important to plan to remove those things that are causing too much friction for you, like what Jody did, which is amazing. So as you're thinking about Jody's experience and you're thinking about your own things for next year, don't just look at the things you want to do or the things you want to accomplish and some of the goals. Take a look at the things that maybe get in the way of you accomplishing those things. Okay, I wanted to do this. I wasn't able to do this because of this. Is that something you can modify in any way? Is that something you can take away and say, well, I have this radio program that takes, so many hours per, maybe it's just a few hours in the studio, like let's say 3 hours getting there and getting ready and getting everything done, but it's an additional 3 hours. So that's 6 hours out of my life. And so, and I'm making those numbers up, by the way, but Jody removing that suddenly gets those 6 hours back, so she can say, okay, 3 hours with family and 3 hours for writing, so she can give to different aspects of her balanced world. and then the last thing I wanted to reflect on goes back to all that extra work Jody had to do as the radio host, and it reminds me of the things not to do as a radio or podcast guest. And I've been thinking a lot about this because Maddie Dalrymple and I are currently working on co-authoring a book for how to be a good guest on podcasts, and that'll be one of the elements is what can you do to provide something for the host. So I'll use a perfect example, and I have it right in front of me, as I was on the Mike Farwell talk radio program talking about my new book, Merry Christmas. Shitter was full about, trivia for National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And I did this when I was in a studio with him in October. It was just a one-page, larger print, bullet form list of speaking points. Little bits of trivia about me, the author, about my previous work, as well as about this book. And in this particular case, the one I did for the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, is I gave the details. Okay, the movie was launched on this day. Here are some stats about the movie. Here are some interesting things about the franchise that it is a part of. And that way, as the host who's about to introduce me as a guest who's written about it, he can very quickly glance down at the bullet points and add those facts in to his script. And that saves his producer, and that saves him some time. And that makes you a desirable guest. Now, I'm going to be on a program on Friday morning, Friday the 20th of December. I was reached out from a producer at an Edmonton talk radio station who wants me to talk to the two morning show hosts on their program at 7:05 a.m. Mountain Time about this book. And so what I did is, I sent a link. Oh, here's the link. You can, from BookFunnel, you can download and you have access to the book. But here is I actually sent a list of trivia questions, which is one document. And then the other document was just a one-pager, again, speaking notes. And it was basically high-level speaking notes. Here, give this to the hosts. They can have it in front of them on a screen or printed in front of them. And as we're talking, they can refer to this, and that gives them plenty of fuel for conversation. So again, things not to do as a radio or podcast guest, things you can do. There'll be more of that coming up. If you want to hear more of those, of course, more than happy to continue to discuss them. But I think I have reflected enough for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the reflection. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jody. I really appreciate you being here for listening. And as I mentioned earlier, please share your own reflections. What were you thinking about when Jody was talking about different things in the interview? You can share those with me. You can email me directly, mark@markleslie.ca. You can comment over at starkreflections.ca, the YouTube channel where this audio is also posted. And that's great, because when you share those reflections, I can then in turn share those with other reflectives in this audience, because we're all reflecting in this together. It's just part of a very reflective community. So I see you. So anyways, thank you for listening. You listening to the podcast is so amazing. I really appreciate having you here. I want to say a huge shout out and thank you to those who support the podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as my coffee buddies who support me over at buymeacoffee.com/MarkLeslie. Thank you for all the caffeine over there as well. But you don't have to provide financial support for the podcast. You being there just listening is support enough. You can also leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That's a great way to share your support for the podcast. Or better yet, share an episode that you really enjoyed. Share that episode with somebody else. Help them listen to some of the great content you get from the guests. I am so lucky that I get to chat with all the time. Almost, I was going to say every week, but it's not every week that I have an interview. So, but much of the time I get to chat with some amazing people. But thank you again for letting me be in your ear. Until next week, which will be the last episode of 2024. This is, as always, Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.